All right. Well, welcome everyone, especially Nick Goldschmidt. Nick and Louis Glunz Wines go back, I don't know, well over 10 years. We've had a great opportunity to be presenting his wines. He was making wines at this little winery called Simi back when I was cutting my teeth in winemaking and cellaring at Gurgitch Hills. And I remember tasting and his one of his early cabs and just being floored, and having the opportunity to have Nick as our first master class Cabernet focused host and educator. It is fantastic to have you here, Nick, and thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me on. And shit, you didn't tell me. Sorry, you didn't tell me I was going to be first up. You know, so I'm gonna try and keep my language clean. We won't tell any sheep jokes. We'll just talk about Cabernet. And as Joe said, yeah, we'll take questions at the end. So I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully you guys can see this. So the wines, I just want to thank you guys for putting it on. I've been talking a lot to Stacey and Jacqueline, and obviously Dan and Joe in the backgrounds as well. But it's you guys, the real workers, that I really wanted to talk to. So we're only going to be talking about Cabernet today. We do other wines as well, but Cabernet is probably about 60% of what we do. And the wines we're going to be looking at today are two wines that I make with my daughters, Forefathers, which is the first wine that I ever made, and then two of my high-end wines. This is my family. I have 5 kids. This is my front yard. And these are the 3 daughters that I make wine with. And obviously the vineyard doesn't look like this now. I was just telling the guys that we've got a severe shortage of water this year, as you may have heard, which is not good. So we're only about 40% of where we would normally be, which is still miles away from what we actually need. So the 3 daughters that you have seen before. So Chelsea is the oldest daughter, and we're not going to be talking about that today. So in 2000, when I was making, when I was still at Simi, I was telling my children about how to make wine without electricity. I'll come off sharing for a second. Because when I lived in Chile in 88, 89, Pinochet, for those who remember, Pinochet was in power. He was a dictator. And so the way he controlled people was he would cut off oil or food, or in some cases, electricity. So I was telling making wine without electricity is pretty hard to do. We'd have to light a fire if we wanted hot water, if we had to put the mangueta, the hoses in the canals if we wanted to cool the tanks, and the generators that we could get were relatively small. In fact, I had the first car in town. That tells you a lot. So most of what we did was we rode horses. So my kids didn't believe me. So in 2000, the 6 of us went out and we hand-picked half a ton of grapes. We handy-stemmed, we pigeage, punched down, basket pressed, and then we hand-pumped it into a barrel. I wasn't stupid. I did put the barrel in the warehouse. So it became 5 gold hands unplugged. And that's sort of how the kids got involved. So in 2001, Chelsea wanted to make wine with me. So I took a drawing that I'd done with her when she was 2. I traced around her head and she colored it in, and that's where the label comes from. But you'll notice that the labels look different. And that's because Chelsea is the oldest child and Hillary is the youngest child. And they face one direction and Catherine faces the other direction. And because Catherine's the middle child, how many middle children are here? Not me. Yeah, middle children, liars, manipulators, think outside the box, and that's why she faces the other direction. But the middle children always say, well, no, they're peacemakers and lovers, and they're the ones that form the universe. So, but I see it in my kids, and there's a long story about going to a parent-teacher night with instead of my wife, and being put in a room with firstborn, second, third, twins, and lastborns. We were broken up. And being a firstborn, it's very different to being a middle child. So anyway, Kate faces the other direction, and that's the first wine that we're going to talk about today. So the Cabernets that we make, we mainly from Oakville or Alexander Valley is mainly what we do. Ultimatum, which you guys haven't seen, then the Game Ranch and Yeoman Plus, which are available in that market, which are really important wines to me. I only make about 100 cases of each of those. We'll try the Game Ranch and Yeoman, and Hillary also from Oakville, and then 2 other Alexander Valley wines. The key elements for me with Cabernet is east facing. So I really want to have morning sun only. I don't want to have afternoon sun all of the vineyards are really have been planted for more than their commercial lifespan. And by that, I mean, most vineyards, when I worked for corporations, remember I was a corporate winemaker for 25 years, the commercial lifespan of a vineyard is 30 years. So anything that goes beyond 30 years has hopefully been able to be disease-free, keep the yields up, and otherwise the commercial viability of those is not good enough. In the last 3 years, I've had, I don't know, 5 or 6 wines over, with 100 points, and each one of those wines has been lower and lower alcohol. In fact, the 2 that we got last year were under 14 alcohol. So early harvest is becoming more important for me too. And I think it also goes along with our climatic influences as well. Cane pruning is important to me. It's a way, there's 3 main ways to prune. There's cane pruning, spur pruning, and head pruning. So we use cane pruning. You'll probably recognize that. We just lay down the 1-year-old wood, and you get good separation of shoots. We could talk about that later if you choose. Herbicides, my second degree is in organics and biodynamics, but I'm not a big believer in organics and biodynamics, but I believe there are parts to that are important. For instance, people think orange juice is good for you because it's organic. Well, believe it or not, the legal limit of lead in wine, it's 50 times higher in orange juice. I mean, they warn children under the age of 7 in New Zealand not to drink orange juice because you can't flush the lead from your kidneys. Did you know that? So when people think about organic and biodynamic, you need to really understand what's important to you. So herbicides is important to me. I'm a big believer in trying to maintain the good guys and bad guys in the vineyard. So we work a lot with that. In the winery, 3 weeks on skins is minimum for me. Most of the time we're at 5 weeks. The main reason is for stability. So you know how wines move from purple to red to brown to orange, especially at Southern's warehouse. Well, at Glunz warehouse, they only go purple and red. So one of the things you'll notice on wines is sometimes you get crusty stuff on the shoulders of bottles of wine. What that is polymeric pigment, which we can talk about too. I use site-specific winemaking. Each one of my wines is single vineyard. So how do I get complexity from within the vineyard? Well, I'll pick it 3, 4, or even 5 times, and I'll use different winemaking techniques on that fruit, even though it's from the same vineyard. And then all of our wines are vegan. And not many wineries are doing that. And we've been vegan since the beginning. It's not, people get around it by saying they are, but they're not. But I'm a big believer in doing that as well. Here's a map that, this is the Russian River, this is the Mykonos. These are the coastal range. The Russian River formed the Napa Valley, if you remember. So Mount St. Helena was lifted up, and that's basically what blocked off the Russian River. Mudslide came off and formed the Knights Valley, but that's why the Russian River now flows out to through the Russian River Valley, which is not true because we need about another 30 million years. But the other big thing is this is Fitch Mountain. So the river actually comes around Fitch Mountain and then out to the ocean through Jenner. This is where I'm sitting right now. This is where I live. The Catherine Vineyard is to the south. The Yeoman Vineyard sits right above it. And the Forefathers Vineyard is to the north. This is the most interesting part of the Alexander Valley because it's east facing, because the sun comes in this direction. But you can imagine that this is extremely steep. These vineyards are extremely steep. So the new vineyard that we're planting actually is in here. It's northeast facing. So the vineyards down here that I work on predominantly are all little knolls. They're little hillsides, and so they face east as well. From the bottom, looking at the little valley that Catherine comes from, it's actually comprised of 5 different vineyards. We used to make semi-reserve Cabernet from this vineyard. And so I've been working on this vineyard for 31 years now, which is scary. And then right above it is the Yeoman Vineyard, which you'll see as well. This is a look at the vineyard. You can see that the vines here are much more vigorous than the vines over here. And so this is part of what goes into making the wine complex. So these canopies here are much bigger than the crop. So we produce too much canopy for the size of the crop. And this is where we end up making what we call the dense wine, which is very rich and very full, but I have to pick it early because there's too much power in the canopy. This is what we call the powerful wine. And this is where the canopy and the fruit are in the same balance. And then over here, the crop is too heavy for the size of the canopy. You can see that the canopy is relatively small. So here we have to drop half the crop on the ground. And this is this is the last time I saw my Suburban before my daughter wrote it off. So anyway, so the bloom to hang, we don't really have time to talk about this today, but in the Alexander Valley, the flowering to harvest day is about 135 to 145 days. If you're talking about Bordeaux, they're talking about 100 days. But so we have much longer hang time in the Alexander Valley. We pick Alexander Valley after Napa Valley. Remember, Napa Valley is hotter than the Alexander Valley. We only destem, and then, as I said, we use this elegant, powerful, dense winemaking with the dense wine, which I mentioned. I don't extract it very much, otherwise I'd have a big tannic monster, whereas the elegant wines, which is the one where I drop half the crop, I extract the heck out of it because those wines are much more fruity. So very site specific. So the Catherine that you're drinking right now, it's old. Obviously the location is really important. It's made up of a mass selection or an old field selection. I don't know if you guys know that. We don't use any clones in any of our wines. That's a big deal for me. In fact, as I'm planting the Staircase vineyard today, or this year, I'm only using old field selections. I'm not using any clones at all. I think clones are boring. And then, as I said, we use site-specific winemaking, and I've been making wine here for such a long time.
G'day, Nick Goldschmidt here. I'm sitting here with 3 glasses of wine, and everything we do is single vineyard. And the way we get complexity out of a single vineyard is by choosing blocks and styles, or working the wines to the way the vines best exemplify themselves. So when I was young, I walked into a room once at a pretty well-known winery with 200 wines on the table. I'm wondering, how am I going to blend 200 wines? I came from New Zealand, I didn't know anything about Cabernet. And so working with a consultant, we figured out the best way to do this is to put them into families. Elegant wines, which are the soft berry fruit wines right up on front of the tongue. The powerful wines, which provide the fleshiness and the richness. And the dense wines, which give us structure and power. So when we go ahead and line all those wines up, I sorted all the elegant wines together, and I chose the best elegant wines and made a blend. I got the best powerful wines, made a blend, the best dense wines and made a blend, and we had 3 wines, all from the same vineyard, all from maybe in the same block or not the same block, but all from the same vineyard. And then we made a blend of these 3 wines, and it was the most complex wine that we could possibly make. So today I continue that process. With elegant wines, we can extract them a little bit more aggressively because we know that the tannins are in a lower concentration than the fruit, so we can extract more tannin. Whereas on a dense wine, if we made wine like that, they become too dry and too tannic. So we lower the extraction and try and make the wines more fruit forward. So if I was to drink an elegant wine, I'm going to get more red cherry, great structure, very forward in the mouth, very elegant, very ripe, but good acidity, red fruit, and very forward in the mouth. The powerful wine, I can immediately get it. It's more black cherry, a little bit of walnut. And the mouth is really rich, really full, powerful. Not a lot going on in the front of the mouth, not a lot going on in the structural part of the mouth either. And then the dense wines, much more chocolate, a lot more black cherry, but all finished, very supple tannins, good structure, good acidity. And so when we put the 3 together, hopefully, and it's never 30-30-30, because in a warm vintage, I probably want a little bit more of the dense component, whereas in a cool vintage, I want more of the elegant component. So it really depends on the vintage. And when I put all 3 together, we get the most complex wine we possibly can from the same vineyard. And that's how we make single vineyard wines really complex.
Yeah, so that was a little bit about how we put those 3 wines together, and you can extrapolate that into the way we process as well. This wine that you're pouring today is the 2018, just got 92 points from Suckling. And this is the future of Stonemason Hill, which is the name of the vineyard. This is a new area that we're going to be planting, and you can see how much schist this is. So we talk about, this is the sort of soil that we seek out in places like Bordeaux, but very high levels of calcium carbonate, which of course is, some people think is desirable. I think moderate levels of calcium carbonate is interesting, but the soil certainly has plenty of it. So it's going to be really exciting to see the wines that we get off that.
Hi, my name is Catherine Goldschmidt, and this is my wine that my father, Nick Goldschmidt, makes for me. It is a Cabernet, and I like to drink it when I come home after quarantine. You don't get to see very many people, but I make a point for my family to make sure that they're all home for Sunday dinner. And when I come home for Sunday dinner, we drink Catherine because I'm the favorite in the family, and they all know
Classic
that.
middle child.
I'm an RVT by day,
Hey,
but by
Nick,
night
I think
I'm a
we are
cat.
still seeing you talk about the blending of the 3 parcels.
Okay. Oh, all right. Let's see if I can stop that. Uh-huh. Sorry, guys.
All good, my friend. If this is the worst technical difficulty we have, it's going to be a great show.
All right. Well, no, you can't see me, I guess. From slideshow. Can you see that photo?
We cannot, no. It says you have started screen share, but there's nothing that's popped up.
It's very interesting. Okay.
We do have a couple of questions if we can take a second. Nancy asks if you could ask what, if you could answer what makes the wines vegan.
Vegan means that there is no animal products used. So the original, what happened was the Greeks, when they made wine, and then they would transport the wine, and the vessels that they used to transport the wine in was the swim bladder of a sturgeon fish. I know it sounds crazy, but the swim bladders were extremely big and they expanded really well. And when the Greeks put the wine in the sturgeon fish and they moved to wherever they were going, when they arrived, the wine was clear. And they couldn't figure out why. So that's when they started grinding fish bladders and putting them into tanks. And that's how fining came around. So that's what we call today, that's called isinglass. So it's the swim bladder of a sturgeon fish. From there, they decided to add milk. And then they started adding blood and other animal products as well. So today we have all sorts of animal products that are used, including eggs. Like most French wines still have eggs, and that is not vegan. So we don't use any eggs, any milk, any isinglass, any gelatin. The only thing that we can use is PPPP, which is a man-made product, but we don't even use that either. So we use basically we don't do any fining agent. The only clarification I give is by using temperature, and the main reason I use temperature is because of Brettanomyces. Brettanomyces tends to settle out if I have that.
Thank you very much. I think that's about it. There's a little discussion on that segment, but I think we can go ahead and keep going.
Okay, let's see if I can do it again now.
There was another question, actually. You only plant east facing. Is that just for cabs?
That's true for everything. I really learned that when I was dealing with Pinot Noir, because Pinot Noir is probably the most sensitive. And remember, we picked Pinot a lot earlier than other varieties, so we have to be careful with that. So yeah, east facing I think is really important, and it's also true from the in the southern hemisphere as well, as you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's see if I can share it now. Can you guys see that? No.
It says that you're starting the screen share.
What about that? Can you see that?
Not yet.
This has never happened to me before.
Yeah, and you've only done this a couple times.
I know.
There you go. We can see one of your file windows.
But you can't see the slideshow.
Correct.
Check which browser. Maybe it's open in a separate browser.
Yeah, I know. That's what I just did. I changed browsers. Please remove this window away from the shared application. Damn it. All right, I don't know what to do. Sorry, guys. All right, I'll just go through the wines myself. I can do it on my flip chart here, and I can I'll make use. Anyway, this is one of the things that we could discuss. One of the things I would discuss is, so this is a cane which I just pruned off a vine yesterday. So the way that we create mass selections or field selections is that when we walk into a vineyard, we can choose vines that taste different to others, especially true with Chardonnay. And so we'll go to that vine, we'll take, we'll try the grapes, and we'll say that that vineyard is, this vine is different to that vine, which is different to that vine, which is different to that vine. So we'll go out and we'll take all the cuttings just from that one vine. And so you can imagine, I get a knife, I chip the bud out. So I take the bud out, and then I go to the rootstock, which, remember, in the early days it was AXR1, now it's 1103 Pulse and 10114, et cetera, What we do is we make a little T in the wood, we peel back the cambium layer, we slip the bud in, and we can grow whatever that is. And so today the main field selections that I use for Cabernet are called Jackson and Jenkins, and that's still true for Catherine. The next wine that we're going to talk about is Hillary. Hillary is my youngest daughter, and the location of that vineyard is, if we were coming down Highway 29, this is 29, this is the Silverado Trail. You got St. Helena, you got Rutherford, and then you get to Oakville. The big winery here is called Nickel and Nickel. You get Mondavi, and then the next winery here is obviously Opus. And the Oakville Crossroad is right here. See that? There is a vineyard right here. And that's Hillary. So it's the same driveway. I did the due diligence on Opus when I was the chief winemaker for Constellation. So I know the vineyard really well. I still got all the gate codes. Michael Salacci is a good friend of mine. But you can buy this at Costco. It's 50,000 cases. It's $320. This is Nickel and Nickel. You can also buy it at many retail outlets out here in California. And this is Hillary, which is on the same, basically the same driveway. So Oakville, I chose Oakville because I prefer elegant tannins rather than Rutherford, which is a little bit fuller and a little bit richer. But the silkiness of those tannins is really appealing to me. And that's why these famous wineries all live there, Scarecrow, Screaming Eagle, Minor, Groth, Plumpjack, Silver Oak, etc. But when Kim Jong-un drops a nuclear bomb and you'll run to the bunker, and you take one bottle of it, a very expensive wine, or 3 6-packs of Hillary, who are they going to let in? You should think about that. And I thought it was really interesting that the Wine Enthusiast came out and nominated the 40 best winemakers under 40 years old. That's amazing. They're exactly the wines I'm not taking to the bunker. Because those 40 winemakers haven't even been making wine for 10 years, let alone 5 years from the same vineyard. So when you're in that bunker for 15 years, are you going to take a chance on a winemaker that's only 40 years old? We're waiting for the 50 best winemakers over 50, mate. Those are the wines I'm taking to the bunker. Anyway, this is Hillary. We only make about 2,000 cases of this wine. This wine just got 93. I thought it was really funny that Harlan and Maiden were on the same sheet. I don't know if you guys saw that in the Wine Spectator, but it's the same sheet. And the biggest one there that Molesworth put in was the Hillary, because it was at 93 points. And it was way more than 700 cases, or a little bit more than 700 cases. And also it was much cheaper as well. So it was pretty funny. All right, so sorry I can't show you that vineyard, show you that video, although I can try one more time when I'm off screen here. The third wine that we're going to be pouring to you today is called Forefathers. Now, when I was running LVMH still wine, I was on a plane. I don't know if you know this, but in 1992, well, let's back up. In 1992, LVMH, when I was still at CME, made me the global blender for still wine. And so they owned a lot of wineries as well, so they've got Cloudy Bay, Cape Mantel in Australia, Ruffino in Italy, Terrasses in Argentina, of course, and that's how I got back into South America. But I was on a plane to Cloudy Bay going, why am I going to Cloudy Bay to make Cab, Chard, Merlot, Savvy, Riesling, and everything else? When you think Sauvignon Blanc, you think Marlborough. When you think Shiraz, you think McLaren Vale in Australia. When you think Malbec, Uco Valley, Argentina, and Cabernet from California. So forefathers means the premium appellation for that variety in the New World. This is before Layer Cake, Cupcake, and all the other bloody cakes. This is legitimate wine. This is single vineyard. You can come and visit the vineyard. You can touch the vines. You can taste them out of the barrel, etc. And then this is a pair of boots that I used to wear when I walked around Simi vineyards when I was winemaker there. And then in the background is my constitution. And I talked earlier about farming and how important it is to me. I mean, this is unusual for me to be in the office right now because in the winter I'm either driving tractors right now or I'm pruning. And so, you know, I'm a touchy-feely guy. It was so funny. One of my distributors just contacted me this morning and said, could I come to their trade show on October 4th? I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you guys know how we make wine? October 4th? I'm a one-man show, dude. You want me to come to your tasting? Why do you get all the fake bastards to show up to your tasting? Get some real people in here, mate. Anyway, and then I stole John Hancock's signature from the bottom of the Constitution. I changed it to my own. And GV is obviously our symbol. And then on the back label, there's a little picture of my father and my son making wine as well. This vineyard is really unique. It's the vineyard. So the Alexander Valley looks like this. And then we go over into the Napa Valley. And as I said, the sun comes in the east direction. So this vineyard is extremely steep. Catherine comes from a vineyard that would be right here. And then Yeoman that we're going to try a little bit later. Sorry, Catherine comes from here and Yeoman comes from here. This would be Yeoman, this would be Catherine, and this would be Forefathers Lone. This is the Lone Tree Vineyard, which would be further up. And there's some really unique things about this wine. Firstly, it's dry farmed. So dry farming is, as I mentioned earlier, that water's become a real issue. And this vineyard has been dry farmed now for 20 years. And why is that important? Is because when you have a berry of Merlot is much bigger than a berry of Cabernet. So a berry of Merlot weighs 1.2 grams and a berry of Cabernet weighs 0.8. And if it's dry farmed, it's 0.7. And when it's that small, your skin to pulp ratio is much higher. And that's why the Forefathers Lone Tree is really black and intense. And it's that color, the color that you see in your glass today is the same color that we crush it. That's how stable this is. And the way we make picking decisions is, of course, we put this, and you can see it on my YouTube channel, that you put the skin in, you put the berry in your mouth, you spit the pulp out, you chew the skin, then you spit the skin out, and then you spit again. And what we're looking for is the color, because in here, in these vacuoles, this is where the tannin and polyphenolic material hang out. And that's what's really important for us, the way for us to judge flavor. So jumping around a little bit, the way we judge it is, you know, if this is the 135 days that we talked about, this is acidity, this is veraison, you get an increase in bricks. Obviously, everyone knows what bricks is. Bricks is a metric term. So that's where you guys lost that space shuttle out behind Mars, wherever it went. And then flavor starts off relatively low, and tannins move from green to dusty to dry to ripe. And where these three things meet in Bordeaux, it's 100 days, but we have 135 in California. And the way we judge that is by chewing the skin. We can measure bricks, but we can't measure flavor and tannin. And of course, this never happens because if we have a heavy crop, tannins take longer to ripen. And if we have a low crop, flavor relatively takes longer to ripen. And then if we get heat, we'll have dehydration. And if we get rain, we get dilution. So all of these things have to come into play. And that's why the winemakers have to go into the vineyard. But that's why we can all get color. That's not a problem. But how stable is that color? And if you remember back to your Melbourne 3 glucosides and your flavanols, remember when you went to chemistry, you guys? Right? You guys aren't that. Here's something to impress your kids with tonight. Here's something that you can impress your kids with, okay? So you guys remember these things, right? Surely you remember these things. All right? These things were called benzene rings, right? You guys all remember these things? This is what you drink every day. This is part of the Melbourne 3-glucoside flavanol family. This is called an anthocyanin. This is purple. So you know how wines move from purple to red? The reason why they get moving purple to red is because you provide heat, light, air, and this thing is purple. You provide heat, light, air, and time. It joins onto another anthocyanin that becomes tannin, and that's red. You provide more heat, light, air, and time. That compound gets bigger and bigger. Crusty shit. You don't want crusty shit. If it's not the year you're born, the year of your first child, the year you're married, the year you got divorced, or some other significant, get rid of it. They're certainly not the wines I want to take to the bunker when they're dropping polymeric pigment out. Those things are going to go orange and brown. So anyway, we try to make the wines really stable, and that's why using site-specific winemaking is really important to our stability of the wine long term. And so just recently, I opened a bottle of the Forefathers. The first vintage we ever made on Forefathers was 1998, and I opened a bottle of 1999, and people couldn't believe it. It was still purple. And I'm looking at it right here. That's what I've got in my glass right now. And you can see, you know, it's crazy the color of that vineyard. So that's really what's unique about it. Okay, any questions? Cool. All right, well, let's talk about yeoman and game ranch. So what happened was, how do we go back to this thing about complexity? How much time have I got left, Joe?
You have got about 20 minutes, sir.
Fantastic. All right, so how do we, this is a whole different school. I'm not using videos. I hope you guys are okay with that.
I'm loving it.
All right, so if you take an aerial view of a vineyard, and remember, vineyards are broken up not based on soils. They're based on what the government felt like what the people were feeling like at that time. So they were broken up basically what was convenient in straight lines and things like that. And so this aerial view of land, and so when we planted it, you can imagine that we cross these different swales or these different soils. And this is why making wine in earthquake countries are really interesting. This is why the countries I work in, British Columbia, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, and California, they're really cool places to make wine because the soils are dramatically different. It's not like Australia, mate. I don't know what Australia is, big flat pancake and it's one soil. I mean, what we do is we can pick up a stone and we can throw it. Well, I can three shots I can at the fire station from here, and yet they won't show up at my property across the street because I'm out of town. I got to get the fireman from Geyserville to come down. Anyway, another story. So you're going to be in a different soil type straight away. So when we walk into that vineyard, we have to say, look, we can't pick these things the same. It drives everybody bonkers, but basically we've got to walk down that vineyard 2-3 times and pick different picking decisions. Because as I alluded to earlier, let's say these vines are the big canopy vines with low crop. And so they're going to ripen far differently to what we consider to be the powerful wines and then what we call the elegant wines. And the way that we determine that is on your tongue. So this was the big aha moment for me, because it's not about the variety, it's about how the wines taste. And so the way we break the wine up on our tongue is these are the elegant wines, which are the berry fruit wines right on front of the tongue, which you saw me talk about in that video. The powerful wines, which provide the flesh and the richness, and the dense wines, which provide the structure. And it's because I'm an engineer, my first degree was in engineering, I had to overthink this, right? So I had to go, hang on a minute. Every year, the elegant wines all come from the same vineyard, the powerful wines all come from the same vineyard, and the dense wines. So let's start using site-specific winemaking to really dial that in. And so we started going out. The big problem for me was the dense wine, because I'd go out there and I go, man, the tannins are green. I go out there a week later and they go dry. I go back a week later, dusty. I go back a week later, raisin. I missed it. And so after struggling with this idea for 3 years, then I thought, you know what, I got to start picking these things earlier, because these canopies are so big, they've got so much power that they ripen the crop too quickly. So what we do then is we go into the vineyard. Man, nothing's going right today. I can't even turn a piece of paper. So we can go into the vineyard and we make a decision. So when we go into the vineyard to look at the elegant wines, we know in an elegant wine, the fruit is always higher concentration than the tannin. In a powerful vineyard, the fruit and the tannin are in the same balance. And in a dense vineyard, the tannin is always higher concentration than the fruit. So I don't want this distance. I don't want this distance to be very big. And that's why in a dense vineyard, I pick it earlier. I have to pick it at about 125 days, here about 135 days. And here, I do want this distance to be big. I can pick it 145 days. Does that make sense? So now, if I look at I've got the elegant wine in the tank. Now I can extract the heck out of it because I know it's always going to be more fruity than it is tannic. So, you know, you have your tank here and you got your seeds and you got your cap and then you got your wine. And we use pump over, pulse air, punch down, whatever you choose to do. But the reason we're doing that is because of this piece in the middle where the wine and the cap are in contact with each other, because this is where the yeast are hanging out, man. This is where all the nutrients are. All the nutrients are in the skins, and so the yeast are having a really good time partying on there. So we want to move that around and keep the yeast healthy, but we also want to increase the amount of color. So in an elegant wine, I can extract. Sorry, I have to talk in metric. The world's moved on, guys. If you want to convert to Fahrenheit, you just add 15 and double, okay? So we give a lot of air, we give more pump over, and then during maceration, I cool the tank down to 18 Celsius. In a dense vineyard, I ferment cold. I ferment at 22. I give less air, less pump over, and then during maceration, I warm the tanks up to 26. So what I'm doing is I'm making the tannins much more stable here and much more long-lived. Okay, make sense? There was a Cabernet class in 5 seconds for you. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is Game Ranch. So the story with Game Ranch is the funny thing was in 2000, we were worried. What did I do with my? I lost my map. And oh, here it is. A very bad map. I'll have to go back to it. We were worried. In 1999, Semi got sold to Constellation. In 2000, we bought Franciscan, Estancia, Blackstone, and Ravenswood, and we were about to buy Opus and Mondavi. So we got concerned that we were going to put a lot of people off the brands. And so we did this thing called the Sommelier Summit, and we invited SOMs from, half of them were MSs and MWs, and the other half were wannabes. And they all came out to see me for 3 days, and it was a soil and wine tasting. So we did this, but I wanted to do 2 tastings. There was 72 sommeliers there, including Doug Frost, who's one of the 3 guys in the US with an MS and an MW. And on day 2, I invited Rick Sayer from Rodney Strong, Larry Levine from Franciscan, Elias Fernandez from Schaefer, and myself. And the 4 of us winemakers spoke about the differences between Merlot and Cabernet. We then poured 8 wines blind to the 72 sommeliers and asked them to pick the 4 Merlots. And guess what? 0. Not one sommelier could pick 4 Merlots from 4 Cabernets. And if you guys think you can, you're on your rocker. Third day, I invited the winemakers, Michael Solacci with Opus, Mondavi, Camus, Phelps Insignia, and who am I forgetting? Somebody else that was famous. Can't remember. Anyway, and then from the Alexander Valley, we had Silver Oak, Lancaster, Jordan, Semi, and AVV. And so we had each winemaker, all 10 winemakers were there. We spoke, and then the 72 sommeliers were asked to pick which 5 wines were from Napa and which 5 wines were from the Alexander Valley. Guess what? Same thing. Nobody. Again, it's amazing that Jim Lowby came out and said, you know, Napa Valley is always worth 5 more points than the Alexander Valley when 72 sommeliers can't tell the difference. He said that. The other thing is interesting is we decided that we would have a vote. Who thinks wine number 1's from Napa, wine number 2, wine number 3, wine number 4? So the 72 sommeliers voted as to which was the most Napa. Guess what? Wine 3, boom, semi-reserve Cabernet was voted most Napa. Come on, guys, loosen up. How many wine lists? And don't you love it when you walk into wine list? I mean, when I go into a restaurant and people say, what wine should I buy? I buy a wine from the person I know. If I see somebody with a well-known brand sitting on their table, I just laugh. I mean, you go to restaurants to try something new, try something different, explore, so that when you go home, you know, you can reassert that. You know, it's the atmosphere in the restaurants when they're back open. I mean, that is so important to our livelihood and the storytelling and what we're all about. So I decided I'd make 2 wines exactly the same. So normally we would pour these 2. In fact, you guys can do this if you've got, you can't do it blind, obviously, because you know who you are. But what you can do is what I do is when I walk into an account, I ask for 3 glasses and I pour 2 wines the same and 1 wine different. So I pour 2 game ranches and 1 yeoman, or 2 yeomans and 1 game ranch. And then I ask the buyer who I'm meeting with, which 2 glasses are the same? Even doing that with 3 wines is very hard to do when the wines are made exactly the same. And I usually lose about 80%. 20% of the people get it right. And then I ask them this, I take away the 1 glass, and then I say, of the 2 wines, which one do you like, the left or the right? And I know that I'm going to tell you this so that if I ever do it to you, you'll see if you can remember. But I always do left and right, and I always have the game ranch in the left and the yeoman in the right. And people almost always choose the right wine, the right-hand glass. And then I unveil it and they buy the left-hand glass because they buy the Oakville. Dude, come on. These wines are made exactly the same. I just told you the story that no one can tell the difference. Oh, but Oakville's easier to sell. That doesn't matter. This is why you guys need to be going to the table and talking to your restaurants and your customers and adding value. Teach people, get them outside their comfort zone, get them to try something new. Because the yeoman's bloody good, mate. It's bloody good. And it's cheaper. So every year, if I don't sell them at the same price, I take the Oakville up $1 just to screw with people. Until one day I'll sell them at the same price. But if we look at pricing, I mean, as the Wine Spectator said, Hillary is the best Oakville Cabernet on the market, both in terms of score and in terms of price. I mean, the prices, there is no, unless you go to Costco, I think, Kirkland makes an Oakville Cab is cheaper than Hillary. The next best value Oakville out there is Mondavi. And then the third one is Game Ranch. It's not even that expensive. Anyway, so where is the vineyard? So let's go back to my bad map here. We're driving down here. This winery here is Napa Wine Company that used to be called Inglenook. We crossed the little bridge here. You guys may know the little bridge. And then you hit, this is, what one is that? Big Pink Winery, Groth. Then you got Plump Jack. And then you got Rudd. And you got Minor. You guys know where I am? Then you go on this side of the road, you got Silver Oak. And then you got this hill. And then you got Gargiulio, and then you got Rudd again. And right here you've got Tench. That's Tench Vineyard, which is another famous winery. And then right here, you got Screaming Eagle. Okay, this hill faces north. This is where the Game Ranch comes from. And what I'll do is I'll send you guys a little video. I'll send you a link a little bit later. I'll send it to Stacey. She can pass it around. But you'll be able to see just the view and where we are in terms of that. So really unique vineyard. Again, it's not dry farmed. We do have a little bit of irrigation here, and I make 3 wines from this hillside. One's called Ultimatum, which as I said you hadn't seen. Then I take the 3 outside rows, and that's where I make the plus wine from, which is this bottle right here. with a black label. So that's the plus wine that I only make about 3 to 4 barrels in any particular year. And then we have the Game Ranch. So this is the 16, which we've shipped all of the 16. We're about to go into the 17. So hopefully you guys have got a chance to try that. And then right next door to it, you're going to try the Yeoman. And Yeoman means, well, firstly, Game Ranch comes from the fish hatchery that is right next to the property. So I live on a fish hatchery here in Dry Creek, and the one over there is called Game Ranch. And so that's where the name comes from. Yeoman for the Alexander Valley. My wife chose that. She thinks it means yeoman of the gate, you know, protector of the vineyard. I thought it meant unemployed, vagabond, homeless guy. So you can choose whichever way you want it to be. It's probably that's probably the way I'll end up in a couple of years anyway. So this is the Yeoman. It's a 2016, which you guys are trying. We still do have some of that. And going back to where that vineyard is it's on this hillside here. So as I said, it sits right above Catherine. What's really cool about this vineyard, it's a real shame I can't show you the video, but it's an old terrace. And again, when you see the video, the clusters are extremely loose. And this is the difference between a clone and a field selection. In a field selection, you get smaller berries, you get more randomness of berry size. But the big thing to me is you get this loose cluster. And when that happens, you have much more ability to get the whole berry ripe rather than with a clone. I mean, clones are boring, man. I mean, when was it? These guys come on, they talk about Dijon clones and UC Davis clone. Dude, that's why all the Chardonnay tastes the same. I don't give a shit whether clone 76 has got more tropical fruit than 95. Get over it. The definition of a clone is you know who your mother is. I know it might be hard for some of you, but in a vineyard sense, it means going all the way back to one plant. How much diversity do you get from one plant? That would be nothing. This is why field selections are so cool. Everything's more random. It's more broken up. It increases complexity. I mean, this is how the Italians weren't stupid, you know. The Italians got it right. That's how they planted. They even went more extreme. They even put Petit Syrah and Carignan in with their Zinfandel. So they even went more extreme. And here we are. We want to be monoculture. You know, so I find the whole thing boring. And that's why trying to preserve these vineyards, it's really important for you guys to support these small vineyards, because without this diversity, everything's going to taste the same. And so I really encourage you to try the Yeoman and try the Game Ranch and try to keep these guys in alive. So I'm just going to wrap up by saying, you know, one of the reasons why I went out on my own, and I went out on my own in 2008. I was a little bit old. I was 47. I should have gone out when I was 45, I think now. But at that point, 2008, if you recall, the industry was in turmoil. We had overproduction. We'd come off a couple of weaker vintages. And of course, the economy was tanking. And so a lot of the large companies were canceling contracts. And so a lot of these guys that I'd known for 20 years at that time had no home for their grapes. And so the reason why Goldschmidt Vineyards has so many single vineyard opportunities is because even today, I'm still looking after and protecting those growers. I'm paying them a little bit more for their fruit than what they would normally get on the open market. But these guys are friends. This is a personal thing. It's a personal relationship. And I hope you saw a little bit of my personality today. And I really can't thank Glunz enough for supporting a small family business such as ourselves. And I really celebrate working with family businesses as well. And that's why it's really important for us to continue to work with Glunz as well. So I want to thank you for your time on a Monday morning. Sorry, my videos didn't work, but I'll send you some of my YouTube links. And one of the things I can do for you or for your accounts or for staff training or anything you want, just send me a little, you can got my email address up there, nick@goldschmidtvineyards.com, and I'll make a quick little personal video. In fact, I did 4 of them on Friday just for accounts. And so, you know, I can just do a 2 little minute staff tasting if you wanted to do that, or if you want me to talk to some of your clients on a more personal way like this, I can do that as well. So please make use of me. I've got nothing going on. I'm just sitting here driving tractors. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Nick, thank you so much. You are always entertaining, and there's never a lack of opportunity to learn from the vast knowledge that you fit in between those earbuds. But thank you so much for sharing information here today with the cab segment. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to let everybody know you have included all the tech sheets as well as pricing sheets. The pricing sheets that you have, we have always in the past had this fabulous grand tasting in the first week of February or the last week of January. Due to the COVID, we can't do that. So we're doing this great series here that Nick is kicking off. And we have special pricing that goes along with that tasting. We're doing the same thing this year, but it's virtual. You can get those tasting prices. They're good for the entire month of February, and it's almost our entire catalog as always. And we have special pricings on Nick's wines, as well as the majority of the rest of our portfolio. If you haven't gotten one of those yet, you can email me or email your sales team member, and they'll get you those pricings. The pricing you have on your sales sheet today is your normal everyday pricing that's broken out by quantities. On all of Nick's wines, you have family programs. So if you buy 1 case of this, 2 cases of that, you can work up to the 5-case quantity discount for that. I will be following up with everyone who's RSVP'd with Nick's YouTube links. So everyone will be able to have access to that. Also CC Nick on there. Please know that often he is R-rated if you do these videos with your staff. Just kidding. But it is, you were very good. I mean, on a scale, baby, you were
No
right
sheep
there.
joke. I didn't even tell a sheep joke.
I know. Thank the Lord. Joe Senior is in the house tonight, or has been in the house as his internet keeps going in and out. So I tell you, we won't go into the first time Nick spoke with Joe Senior in the house. But do we have any questions coming out from the crew we have? We've got some time. Mike Miller had asked if you can speak to the variables between the 2013 vintage yeoman and the 16 vintage.
Thanks, Joe.
And Nick, that was a question to you, my friend.
What was the question?
So it's asking if you could speak to the variables between the 13 yeoman and 16 yeoman. 13
and 16.
Yes.
Okay, 13 obviously was the big flashy vintage. It was a heavier crop. You know, if we were to rate, I mean, look, let's face it, the differences between the vintages is not that big. I mean, we talk about, when was the last really bad vintage we had was 89. So if you were to rank elegant vintages versus powerful vintages versus shitty vintages, you know, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 7, 88, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. I mean, look at that. If you ruled out the 80s, if you did this in France, do this in France. So when people talk to me about the differences between the vintages, it's not that big. So, I mean, the yield of 13 was a big yield, and so that panicked a lot of people. And maybe the question is, will those wines not last as long? But I tell you what, it's so funny that you mentioned the 13. I was about to post a video this morning of, I just tasted the Catherine 2013. I couldn't believe it. I mean, the thing is just banging out of the glass. It's purple, it's fruity, it's full on, good acidity. The wine is really held together. And then 15 is in the same vein, but less crop. And then 16 has got a little bit more acidity in it. So 16, you would say, all right, so 16 is going to be a little bit more graphite, a little bit longer lived, etc. But 16 and then 17 is fairly close to it as well. 18 again is like 13, big crop, flashy vintage. And then 19 is superb. So again, we've had a really good run, and I think 21 is going to be more similar to what 2020. Well, if we'd picked a lot of 2020, 2020 would have been 2021 will be fairly similar, because I can anticipate this is an El Nino year, and so we're going to have a warm start, etc. So unfortunately, it's probably going to be another fire season here, but you better get used to it, because we're going to have fires every year. And it's so funny that we have fires around the world. This is the 11th year of fires for me, but no one ever talks about fires. And this is the first time people have started talking about it. But you guys have been selling smoky wines for years. Just suddenly realize that it's a problem. And it is.
Joe, could I ask a follow-up?
Yes, Mike.
Okay. One of the things I was thinking, I mean, when we had the 13 at the trade show, we all fell completely in love with it. I drank one recently, fabulous. And at least my brain library told me that 13 and 16 had significant similarities. And I was just on top of the speaking of it, is there was it a weather consideration that leads one vintage to be somewhat more similar? I think all of us are still dumbfounded that you just rattled off all those vintages on your board so quickly and effectively. So I'm just that much more interested in what is that specifically weather related then between one vintage and the next? Is it all about the weather? Thanks, Nick. You rule.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's all about you, Mike. Because people call me, hey dude, I bought 2 bottles of I bought 2 bottles of Yeoman. I had one one night, one the second night. I really didn't like the second one. I'm sorry. Oh, when did you have the first one? Wow, it was Friday night. I came home from work. I asked my wife to marry me. Yeah, tasted great. Oh, when did you have the second one? It was Monday. I came home from work. It was a shitty day at work. Yeah, of course it tasted bad. So I think part of it is the atmosphere that you're drinking it in. But yes, I think that we are. I mean, this is why vodka and gin are a waste of time. Where is your enjoyment in drinking spirits? You get to tell that story once. I 3 times distilled it and it comes from a potato. Oh, that's a great story. See, with wine, I get to tell the story of the people. I get to tell the story of the vintage. I get to tell the story of who I am. Look, when I was at Aloe de Mac, I gave 5 winemakers 10 tons of Cabernet each from the same vineyard. And after a year, we sat down. So this is a winemaker from Clos de Bois, William Hill, Atlas Peak, Gary Farrell, Mum. We all made the same wine from the same grapes. And at the end of the year, we all sat down and we tasted the wines. The wines were barely recognizable from the same vineyard. And yet when I made beer, guess what? When I go to work the next day, it's going to do the same job as I did yesterday, which is the same job as I did tomorrow. This is why it's so boring. This is why wine is exciting and exhilarating. And what makes it different is because every year I'm going to try something just a little, I'm going to twist it just a little bit. So I never want the winemaker to overshadow the vineyard, but when winemakers say that wine is made in the vineyard, bullshit. Because as I just alluded to, I can give you 5 winemakers, the same grapes, and they're all going to make different wines. So of course wine is not made in the vineyard. Although it is, I'd say, if I had to put a number, I'd say 40 to 50% is made in the vineyard. And of that, probably 20 to 25% of it is determined by the climate. And so 13 was a significant change for us because 11 and 12, if you remember, were cold vintages. 10, 11, 12 were all, well, 12 is the best vintage in the history of man. We all know that. But 10, 11, and 12 were all relatively cold vintages and low crop. And then we came to 13, bang, we had one of the biggest crops we'd ever had. 16, though, is different because we'd come off, 15 was a relative, it wasn't a big vintage, but it was a bigger vintage. And then we came to 16 and we had a low crop. So 16 was, I think, more interesting for me to make wine from because the berries were smaller. It was a warmer vintage. And so we had less water, less irrigation, and we picked a little bit earlier. But if I look at since the 31 vintages that I've made in California since I've been here, only 7 times have I picked in August. Have I picked Cabernet in August? And 5 of those have been in the last 6 years. So yeah, we're having a big change, not only in the way that we think about wine and the way that we want to make wine with lower alcohol and better acidity, but we are definitely now seeing influence of the climate. So as we move through time, I think that I'm going to, especially Zinfandel, I'm going to my goal in life is to make Yeoman at 12.5 alcohol.
I would love that, man.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's going to get the respect. But anyway, that's what I'm intending to do.
Well, I love that idea. We had another question for you. You mentioned a wine that it followed up. You haven't seen this, Ultimatum. There's a question as to what it is and when Glunz can get some.
Well, you may not want it. It's so all my neighbors are like $2,500, $3,000 a bottle. So this is the Ultimatum. It's got a topo map on it, and it comes from the top of this hill, and it's a very rare beast. It's very hard wine to make, a very risky wine to make, but it's going to retail at about $500, something like that. But it's still relatively cheap to who all my neighbors are. But really an extremely exposed site, which is what makes it very interesting. So yeah, but I'll make sure I send you a couple of bottles, Joe, of the first vintage, which was 16, and you can taste it.
That'd be awesome. I am looking in the chat box. There's nothing else at this point. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to anyone to unmute. If you'd like to throw a question to the always knowledgeable and always opinionated Nick Goldschmidt, please go ahead and hit unmute and pop that question through yourself.
We lost half the people anyway.
Yeah, we've only lost about 10 people, which is always telling of the entertainment factor of Nick Goldschmidt.
Lewis, you had a question?
Yeah, I definitely do. Thanks for noticing, Nick. All right, do you recommend to decant any of these wines in particular for optimum enjoyment?
You know, I love that question. It's a fun question because, you know, when we do these trade shows and things like that, we always pour our wines in the decanters and, oh man, they got to be more exciting. So the customers always want to come on over and taste wines out of decanters. So there's something there. But, you know, people used to use decanters for wines that were really old. You know, they'd say, oh, it needs time to breathe. I'm like, dude, no way, man. I want to the only reason to decant a wine for me is to take it off any sediment, which of course I'm not a big fan of sediment anyway. So hopefully there isn't any, but the only reason I do it is just to take it off the sediment. And then I want to pour it back in the bottle. I don't want to have this thing floating around with lots of air. That thing has been in bottle for, 20 years. And now you're just going to give it this big oxygen rush. If anything, I'd probably pour a younger wine into a decanter than a older wine, because the younger wine is going to be more expressive. I mean, I wish we can blame the Greeks for a lot of things, but unfortunately, the Greeks invented cork, whereas if we'd invented screw cap, it would have been a completely different argument. So, with a cork, I just threw a whole bunch of corks in the trash today, but when you pull the cork out of a bottle, you'll notice there's a big bulb in it, right? It has a bulb in it, and that's because we blow glass into the mold instead of suck glassing into the mold. And so our glass does not have a straight side. So it's very hard to get, that's why the cork is effective, because when you squeeze a cork, it presses against the glass. But for that first 48 hours, you get this oxygen going past the cork. So and then theoretically, we put it in this reductive environment. We leave it there for 20 years. Then we pull the cork out and all the wine goes, sucks all this air in, and so you get this huge change in the evolution of the wine. But the winemaker's trying to make, this is fruit, man. This is fruit. This is not wood. It's not alcohol. It's not acid. This is fruit. This is a living, breathing, evolving thing. And so I think we want to put it in the winemaker's trying to make it fruit driven. And so we really need to try and do everything we can to preserve that fruit, to really understand what the winemaker's been trying to do. So if anything, I'd put a young wine in a decanter rather than an old wine. And if I did put an old wine in, it would only be quickly just to decant it off any solids that it had.
Thanks for that question, Lewis. Any other questions out there?
Hey Nick, it's Stacy. Just one quick question. You had mentioned that you do low yields. So how low of a yield do you do? Talk about that.
Yeah, so that's a really, it's a tricky one to answer because people talk about, like if I told you a wine is 2 ton an acre, you're going to go verse. And if I said this wine is 2 ton an acre and this one is 8 ton an acre, everyone's going to go, oh, I prefer the 2 ton an acre every time. But let me show you, it's not about low yield, it's about balanced yield. So if this is your vineyard and you can do, it's a bell-shaped curve. I'm making this up as I go along. So you can, the ideal crop range for a particular vineyard depends on the soil. So if you have a nice, deep, rich soil, your yield to quality ratio could be like that. So let's say this is quality and this is tons. So if you have a big, deep soil, your range could be 2 ton an acre to 10 ton an acre, and you'd have the same quality. If you have a very thin soil, a very exposed site like the ultimatum, that curve's going to look like this. And you have to be very specific. So this could be 3 ton an acre, this could be 4 ton. I'm making the number up, but it's a very narrow range because your soil is very limited. So when I say low yield based on the soil that it's in. I mean, I have a wine I make for somebody else at 10 ton an acre. It's never scored less than 90 points in any magazine, which is, and if I told people that, they would go, you're crazy. It'll never happen. So if I tell you it's 4 ton an acre, oh, that's got to be worth, $50 a bottle. If I tell you it's worth 10 ton, if it's 10 ton an acre, oh, it's going to be worth $10 a bottle. No, it doesn't work like that. It's more based on the soil and making sure we get the canopy balanced. I mean, there's 2 key numbers that we look at in vineyards. The first one is 15 buds per meter. 15 buds per meter is the world standard for growing grapes. That means on 1 meter of wire, 3 feet, 1 meter of wire, I need 15 shoots. Each one of those shoots produces 2 clusters. And then the other thing that we look at is we want 13 leaves per shoot. That's the other standard we look at. So then once you throw that up there, then you discuss, well, how wide do I need to have my plants? Because that goes back to tons per acre. So if I have 2,000 vines in an acre versus 4,000 vines in an acre, it depends on how many kilos I produce on each plant. So what we do is, what I'm planting at is, so we have a very narrow bilateral. This is cane prune. So I have 5 buds here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have 2 buds here, which I don't allow to perform because they're the canes going up to the wire. And then I put two bud spurs in here. That gives me two buds, and I've got 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 on 1 meter. And so my canopy height is at 0.8 meters where I put my fruiting wire. And then I want my canopy height, because I want to hit 13 leaves, I've got to have at least 1.2 meters. Now, if it was Syrah's got a longer internode length, whereas Cabernet has got a shorter internode length. So with Cabernet, I can actually put the canopy a little bit shorter than what I would with Syrah. So when you talk about tons per acre, it really depends on the variety, the soil, and what your standard operating hypotheses are. But yeah, it's a tricky question, and it's one that I try to stay away from because you have to understand, there's so much to know.
So many variables.
So yeah.
Absolutely great question. Thanks, Stace.
Yeah, good question, Stacey. Thank you.
Any other questions out there for our good friend Nick?
Thank you. Appreciate it. I hope
Awesome.
You found some wines you like.
Nick, there's a ton of compliments on chat. All for me, of course. No, just kidding. For you, and everybody wishes you were their teacher growing up in high school and college, and a lot more entertaining than they were. But thank you so much for the presentation today, and for the master class that we had. Which, there you go.
That's what I was doing last night.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I don't know that we have time to walk through that one, but I
No.
wanted to thank everybody for participating today, for coming in, and please, we'll follow up via email with the YouTube information, as well as links to our next classes. Doug Frost is going to be doing a class later this month.
Wow.
Yeah, he's going to be
Can
doing.
you send me the link? I want to join that one.
Absolutely not a chance. I think that was on the contract that we wrote. Is Doug said, do not let Nick Goldschmidt.
Oh my God.
I'll definitely get you that
legend.
link. He
He's
is
a legend.
fantastic. So
Oh my God.
he's going to be doing that. And we've got another master of wine. Bob is going to be joining that one as well. Although Doug doesn't know Bob's going to join. So don't tell
Bob Betts. You're talking about Bob Betts.
No, Bob, not who we were just talking.
Bob Polensky.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. All right.
So anyway, so it'll be a fun master wine thing. But we have 7 more to go every Monday and every Wednesday through the month of February. We're hosting these. Mondays are our master classes. Wednesdays are our wine Wednesdays, where we'll take a closer look at mostly new wineries represented here at Lewis Glunz Wines. We hope that you guys will all be able to enjoy the wines with us in these fabulous little tasting kits. And thank you very much for your time. All right, Nick, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, everyone.